My name is Lin An-Ran. I am the daughter of a minor fifth-rank official, a man of integrity but little income. My father devoted his life to scholarly pursuits, never one for flattery or schemes. So, by the time I came of age, I had no promising marriage prospects. Relying on an old kindness from a palace matron, I was brought into the Eastern Palace, becoming a low-ranking palace maid in charge of historical texts at Chillify Palace. For me, this was a stroke of luck. I possessed no beauty that could topple kingdoms, nor any outstanding talent in music, chess, calligraphy, or painting. My greatest desire was to become an invisible speck of dust within this vast forbidden city, to simply abide by the rules, live day by day, wait until I was old enough to leave the palace, marry an ordinary man, and lead a tranquil life. My motto could be summed up in 4 words: absolutely no attention. I always walked with my head bowed, worked a little slower than others, feigning a bit of clumsiness so no one would notice me. Life drifted on peacefully until one fateful afternoon. I was returning books to the various palaces when I encountered Consort Zhang's entourage. She was a newly favored concubine in the Eastern Palace, notorious for her petulant nature and bullying of subordinates. Seeing my rustic appearance, she immediately sought trouble. To avoid complications, I hurriedly hugged my stack of books, turned into a small alley, and scurried into a dusty old storeroom in the library's corner, planning to wait for them to pass before emerging. In my haste, I tripped over the threshold, tumbling forward, my head striking hard against the base of a long-forgotten, dust-covered bronze phoenix statue. The world spun, and I lost consciousness. When I awoke, my head still throbbed with a dull ache, but fortunately, there were no external injuries. I quickly dusted off my clothes, picked up the fallen books, and silently prayed that no one would discover I had been hiding there. From that day on, my life took a turn I could never have imagined, even in my wildest dreams. A few days later, with the bruise on my head almost gone, I was sweeping fallen leaves in the Chillify Palace courtyard with other palace maids when His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, arrived. This was the first time I had seen the future ruler of the realm up close. Everyone hurriedly prostrated themselves, heads bowed low, daring not to look up. I followed suit, but curiosity got the better of me, and I secretly stole a glance. Crown Prince Yuan truly lived up to his reputation as the emperor's pride and a god in the hearts of the common people. He wore a sky-blue imperial robe, its edges embroidered with silver thread. His stature was tall and straight, like a pine tree on a mountain. His face seemed sculpted by the heavens, with sharp, star-like eyes, a high, straight nose, and thin, seemingly cold lips that curved perfectly. His demeanor was both elegant and majestic. Every step he took exuded the aura of a future emperor. He paused beside an elderly eunuch who was coughing, speaking a few gentle words of concern, his voice as warm as a spring breeze. In that instant, I felt an overwhelming admiration and respect. A perfect, flawless ruler. As he walked past me, his indifferent gaze merely swept over me, as if I were a blade of grass by the roadside. I lowered my head, my heart pounding with tension, but at that very moment, a completely different voice echoed clearly in my mind. The voice was lazy, hoarse, carrying an undeniable hint of wickedness, and it was definitely the Crown Prince's. "Oh, this little palace maid has such a soft waist. I wonder what it would feel like to squeeze it tight. Those lips look sweet. A taste would surely make her sob." I froze, my entire body stiff. I snapped my head up, only to see the Crown Prince's flawless back already in the distance, his demeanor still noble, cold, and utterly unblemished. Am I going mad? It must be a lingering effect from hitting my head earlier. I quickly shook my head, trying to dispel that terrifying illusion. How could such a virtuous Crown Prince harbor such beastly thoughts? I tried to convince myself it was just an illusion. Until a few days later, I was ordered to deliver a stack of memorials to the Crown Prince's study. When I arrived, he stood before his desk, practicing calligraphy, his demeanor focused and otherworldly, like an immortal. The atmosphere in the study was solemn and quiet, with only the faint scent of ink and sandalwood. Another palace maid was grinding ink, but she seemed to be doing it poorly, causing the Crown Prince to frown slightly. He glanced around, his eyes settling on me. "You, come here and grind the ink." My heart felt like it would leap out of my chest. I trembled as I stepped forward to take the ink stick, my hands cold, sweat beading in my palms. I bowed my head, trying to focus on grinding the ink, not daring to look at him. "Raise your head." His voice was still gentle, yet carried an irresistible authority. I slowly looked up, his deep eyes gazing at me without emotion. He reached out, his long, slender fingers with their distinct knuckles, took my hand, adjusting my posture. The force must be even, neither fast nor slow. Grinding ink is like governing a nation, one cannot be impatient. His voice offered the teachings of an exemplary ruler, but in my mind the nightmare returned. Her fingers are cold, but her skin is so soft. How beautiful would that pale nape be with a deep crimson mark? I truly want to see her appearance when all her defenses crumble, her trembling voice only able to call my name. Those possessive, perverse thoughts pricked my eardrums like needles. His breath caressed my ear, carrying the fresh scent of sandalwood, yet the words in his mind were utterly defiled. This horrifying contrast made my mind explode. My face burned, my body trembled uncontrollably. A strange, shameful heat coursed down my spine, making my legs turn to jelly. Clang. The inkstick slipped from my hand, falling onto the inkstone and shattering into two pieces, splattering black ink onto his sky-blue sleeve. I was utterly terrified, immediately prostrating myself on the ground, kowtowing repeatedly. "This servant deserves to die, this servant deserves to die. Please, your highness, forgive me." In the deathly silence, I heard a faint chuckle from above. He sat down, propping his chin lazily, looking down at me. His outward appearance still exuded magnanimity. "It's nothing, merely a small mishap. You may withdraw." As if granted a great pardon, I hurriedly kowtowed in gratitude, then scrambled to my feet, not daring to look him in the eye, wanting only to flee this place as quickly as possible. As soon as I turned my back, that wicked voice echoed again, like a verdict sealing my fate. This kneeling posture is truly obedient. Next time, I must make her kneel for an entirely different reason. I ran from the study, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. This time, I could no longer deceive myself. I wasn't mad, nor was it an illusion. I had truly heard the crown prince's thoughts. The ruler whom the entire realm hailed as a saint was, in reality, a monster in human guise. And I, Lin An-Ran, had inadvertently become the new plaything in that monster's sights. The invisible life I had longed for was, from this moment on, utterly over. From that horrifying day, Crown Prince Yuan was no longer a saint in my eyes, but a devil cloaked in human skin. I began a life of fearful evasion. Every day, I prayed to the heavens and to Buddha, hoping only to avoid encountering that demon. I deliberately sought out tasks in the most secluded corners of the library, always listening intently. The moment I heard the sound of his sedan chair or a eunuch's distant announcement, I would immediately find a nook or cranny to hide in, like a mouse spotting a cat. I even feigned illness for several days, confining myself to the servants' quarters, hoping my existence would be forgotten. But I was too naive. The more I hid, the more that malicious cat seemed to be intrigued by this particular mouse. After 3 days of feigning illness, the head matron brought me a box of premium tonic, saying it was bestowed by His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. He had apparently remarked that a diligent and careful young palace maid named Lin An-Ran, who managed the texts, pleased him greatly. Hearing of my illness, he had specially granted this reward, instructing me to recover quickly, as his study could not do without me. The entire servants' quarters buzzed with excitement. Everyone looked at me with envy and admiration. They believed I had caught the crown prince's eye, and that rising in favor was only a matter of time. Only I, the one involved, trembled with fear. Holding the exquisite box of tonic, it felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Diligent and careful, cannot do without her. This was clearly a warning. He was telling me, little mouse, don't even dream of escaping my palm. The next day, I dared not feign illness again. Pale-faced, I dragged myself to the library. The moment I entered, I saw his familiar sky-blue silhouette standing before a tall bookshelf. My heart leaped into my throat. He was discussing the compilation of ancient texts with several high-ranking officials, his words profound and righteous, his demeanor distinguished. The officials nodded in agreement, praising him profusely, their eyes filled with reverence for the talented and virtuous ruler-to-be. I quickly bowed my head, intending to sneak into the inner stacks to hide, but his gentle voice rang out, calling my name precisely. Lin An-Ran. I froze, unable not to step forward, trembling as I bowed. This servant greets your highness. He turned, his perfect face devoid of expression, but the voice in my head was full of mockery. Oh, look at the frightened little mouse. She only feigned illness for 3 days, and her face is already as white as a ghost. I truly want to see what she looks like if I shed those stiff clothes. I bit my lower lip hard, my nails digging into my flesh to keep myself from collapsing. The Crown Prince pointed to the highest bookshelf and calmly said, "I wish to find the ancient edition of the classic of mountains and seas. I recall it stored on the very top. Fetch it for me." That bookshelf reached almost to the ceiling. One needed a ladder to climb it. I meekly assented, then struggled to drag the heavy wooden ladder over. I was afraid of heights, and my legs trembled uncontrollably as I climbed each rung. Nearing the top, I reached out to search for the book, swaying precariously. Suddenly, I felt the ladder gently shake. I looked down in alarm, only to see the Crown Prince standing directly at the base of the ladder, one hand steadying it, looking up at me. The distance was so close I could clearly see his long, curved lashes. His expression remained calm and gentle. "Be careful." But the sound in my head was a tempest. "This position is perfect. From this angle, I can see the soft curve of her calf. Her skirt flutters slightly, making one wonder what secrets are hidden beneath. This small waist, if I were to reach out and hold it, would she scream in fear? Her screams would surely be delightful to hear." Those words ran through my body like an electric current. I was so panicked my mind went blank, my hands and feet fumbling. I snatched a book, no longer having the presence of mind to check if it was the one he needed, then hastily climbed down. In my rush, I missed a step. "Ah!" I cried out, tumbling backward. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting to hit the ground face first, but instead I fell into a warm, firm chest, carrying the familiar scent of sandalwood. I opened my eyes, realizing with horror that the Crown Prince had caught me in his embrace, one arm supporting my back, the other gripping my waist. Our posture was incredibly intimate. My entire body was practically pressed against his. Through the thin layers of clothing, I could feel his toned muscles and the scorching heat emanating from his body. My face burned red as if on fire. Thank you, Your Highness," I stammered, frantically trying to squirm free, but his arm tightened further, preventing any movement. He leaned down close to my ear, his outer voice still impeccably concerned. "Are you all right? Are you hurt anywhere?" But the voice in my mind was that of a demon savoring its feast. So soft. "This waist truly feels good to hold. Her whole body is boneless and supple. It's delightful to embrace her. Is that osmanthus fragrance on her? So sweet." If I were to lean down and kiss those trembling lips now, would she bite me? Or would she completely melt in my arms, losing all control? This dual assault, both physical and mental, nearly shattered me. I was terrified, ashamed, yet a strange, numb sensation spread from where he touched me. I looked up, meeting his deep gaze. In his eyes, I saw my reflection, small and pathetic like a rabbit fallen into a wolf's den. And for a brief moment, I seemed to catch a glint of wicked amusement in his eyes, a look utterly inconsistent with his outwardly righteous demeanor. Just then, an official coughed behind us, and the Crown Prince reluctantly released me. He stepped back, adjusted his robes, and resumed his dignified, scholarly appearance. "You must be more careful next time." I hurriedly knelt, my mind in a chaotic whirl, unable to utter a word. He took the book from my hand, flipped through a few pages, then frowned. "This is not it." He then turned to the officials and said, "It seems we won't find it today. Let us discuss elsewhere." The group quickly departed, leaving me alone kneeling on the cold floor, my body still trembling from the panic. I looked down at the book discarded beside me. It was a collection of beautiful love poems, not at all the classic of mountains and seas he had mentioned. It was then that I realized with a shock, he never intended to find a book at all. He merely wanted to play with me, to see my frightened, flustered expression. Escape was futile. This cat would never leave its mouse in peace. After the incident in the library, I realized that running away was the most foolish thing to do. Instead of letting him go to the trouble of finding excuses to summon me, I decided to face him. I returned to my usual clumsy, slow-witted palace maid persona, but inside, I had built a solid fortress. Every time I went to Chenkian Palace, I told myself I was just a wooden puppet, without emotions, without thoughts, for only then could I survive the stormy thoughts of that demon. But I had underestimated his ruthlessness. He seemed to thoroughly enjoy watching me pretend to be calm while my inner world was in turmoil. He began summoning me to his side more frequently, for reasons that couldn't be more flimsy. Sometimes, another servant's tea was too hot, so he'd call me to test it again. Other times, he'd claim I was knowledgeable about texts, forcing me to stand by his side to answer trivial questions. Every second I stood near him was torture. He could be seriously discussing irrigation matters with officials, but in my head, his voice would be saying, Today, she's wearing a butterfly-shaped hairpin. If that butterfly were perched on her collarbone, it would be so vivid. I could only bow my head deeply, hoping my hair would hide my flushed face. This mental torture continued until one day, the Crown Prince received an invitation to a tea and poetry gathering at Lin An-Ran Pavilion, hosted by several esteemed scholars. It was an elegant event, but everyone in the palace knew it was a subtle confrontation. Besides the Crown Prince, Prince Yang, his ambitious uncle who always saw the throne as his own, would also be present. The day before the event, the Crown Prince suddenly summoned me. He was sitting by the window, reading a book, the afternoon sun casting a golden glow on his handsome profile, creating a picturesque scene. He calmly said, "Tomorrow, you will accompany this prince to Lin An-Ran Pavilion." I was so startled I almost dropped the tea tray. To go to a place filled with such prominent figures, I was just a lowly palace maid. How could I possibly? As if reading my confusion, he put down his book, his eyes serene. "You work carefully, you don't talk much, you are very suitable, it is decided." That was his outward statement, but the inner voice, which only I could hear, revealed a naked conspiracy. Prince Yang always thinks I'm a workaholic, indifferent to women, a boring pedant. Today, I'll let that old fox see that I too appreciate beauty. This little mouse looks adorable when she's flustered. She'll surely put on a good show for him. My blood ran cold. I realized with a shock that he no longer just wanted to tease me, he wanted to use me as a pawn on his political chessboard, a shield to blind his enemies. The next day, I donned my neatest palace attire, trying to keep my face expressionless, and followed the Crown Prince's sedan chair to Lin An-Ran Pavilion. Sure enough, Prince Yang was already there. He was a middle-aged man with a benevolent facade, but his eyes always harbored calculation and malice. When he saw me, an unfamiliar face serving tea behind the Crown Prince, a scrutinizing glint flashed in his eyes. Throughout the banquet, the Crown Prince displayed immense concern for me. He would subtly signal me to change his tea when it cooled, or ask me a question or two about literary allusions in a recently recited poem. His actions were both decorous and indicative of special favor, causing those around us to steal glances at me. I could only keep my head bowed, my hands clasped tightly within my sleeves, feeling Prince Yang's gaze like a sharp knife slicing into me. The climax of the play arrived when the Crown Prince was writing calligraphy. He deliberately swung his brush a little too forcefully, splattering black ink onto his white sleeve. Feigning annoyance, he frowned slightly, then turned to me, his voice allowing no refusal. "Accompany this prince inside to change robes." With that, he rose and walked towards a small, prepared resting room within the pavilion. I stiffened, but under everyone's watchful eyes, I had no choice but to obey. I trembled as I followed him, feeling as if I were stepping into the mouth of a tiger. As the door closed, all the outside noise was cut off. In the small, quiet space, only he and I remained. The scent of sandalwood on him seemed to intensify, enveloping me and making it hard to breathe. He stood with his back to me, casually extending his arms. "Help me!" My heart hammered like a drum. This was the first time I had been alone with him in such an enclosed space. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, then tremblingly stepped forward to help him unfasten his belt and then remove his ink-stained outer robe. As my fingers brushed against his thin inner garment, I could feel the warmth and firmness of his chest through it. I recoiled in alarm. He didn't turn around, but the voice in my mind echoed, lazy and dangerous. Her trembling fingers touching my skin, what an interesting sensation. Does she know that if I wanted to, I could hold her tightly right now, and no one would dare disturb us here? The scent of her hair is so distracting. My face burned. I quickly took a clean robe from nearby and draped it over him, trying to finish the task quickly and escape. When I moved around to the front to help him refasten his belt, he suddenly turned. The distance between us was so close I could count each of his eyelashes. His eyes were fathomless, gazing directly into mine. I recoiled in fear, but my back was already against the cold door. He reached out an arm, propping his hand on the door right beside my head, completely trapping me within his embrace. Your Highness," my voice trembled. He said nothing, only watched me in silence, but in my mind there was a tidal wave of lust. Her collar is slightly loose, revealing her delicate collarbones. The skin beneath that robe must be even smoother. I truly want to lean down and use my lips to verify if it's as sweet as I imagine. Her frightened appearance right now, her tear-filled eyes, her trembling lips are truly a fatal invitation. He slowly lowered his head. I was so scared I squeezed my eyes shut, my entire body shaking uncontrollably. His hot breath brushed against my cheek. I could feel him very close. My heart felt like it had stopped, awaiting the impending violation. But then I only felt his cold fingers gently brush a stray strand of hair from my cheek. Then he took a step back, his voice calm as if nothing had happened. "All right, let's go out." I opened my eyes, staring at him blankly. He had returned to his perfect crown prince persona, robes neatly adjusted, his demeanor majestic. The sudden shift left me disoriented, my mind reeling. When we returned to the banquet table, I saw Prince Yang glance at us, a faint sneer playing on his lips. He must have thought the young, inexperienced crown prince was neglecting affairs of state for a mere palace maid amidst the common people. The play had ended. I, the pawn, had excellently fulfilled my role. I stood with my head bowed behind the crown prince, but inside, a storm raged. I was no longer just a cheap plaything. I had become a tool in the struggle for the throne. My life, from this moment on, was truly bound to this terrifying demon. The drama at Lin Shui Pavilion transformed my name, Lin An-Ran, from an unknown speck of dust into the focal point of the entire Eastern Palace overnight. Rumors spread like wildfire, embellished by the gossiping tongues of palace maids and eunuchs, ultimately turning me into a new femme fatale. My life was completely overturned. Those who once looked down on me now fawned and flattered. Those who had treated me as heir now regarded me with eyes full of jealousy and envy. Everywhere I went, people pointed and whispered. This favor brought me no glory whatsoever. It was like an invisible yoke, tightening around my neck, making it impossible to breathe. And real danger found me faster than I expected. That day, I was ordered to the imperial kitchen to fetch a box of pastries for the crown prince. On my way back, passing through a small, secluded garden, I was intercepted by consort Zhang's group. She was as arrogant as the first time I met her, but now her eyes held undisguised hatred. "Oh, look who it is. Isn't this Lady Lin the crown prince's great favorite?" she drawled, her face full of sarcasm. I bowed, trying to remain calm. "This servant greets consort Zhang." "Stand up." She waved her hand and stepped closer, scrutinizing me from head to toe. "This concubine is truly curious. What tricks did you use to catch His Highness's eye? Your face is merely average, and your figure is like a dry branch. Could it be that His Highness's taste is so peculiar?" I remained silent. I knew any words from me would only add fuel to the fire. My silence seemed to infuriate her. She jutted out her chin, and a palace maid beside her stepped forward, snatched the box of pastries from my hands, opened it, and cried out with feigned alarm, "Consort, look, has a piece of this osmanthus cake been nibbled on?" My heart sank. This was a dirty trick, yet incredibly effective in the palace. Consort Zhang chuckled coldly. "How audacious, daring to steal His Highness's food. Guards, take this thieving wench to the lotus pond and dunk her in until she clears her head." Two burly matrons immediately rushed forward, seizing my arms. I struggled in terror, but how could my strength match theirs? This servant is innocent. But no one listened. They dragged me roughly towards the cold lotus pond. I looked desperately at the tranquil surface of the pond, an extreme fear rising in my heart. Falling into the pond in this chilly weather, even if I didn't drown, I would surely fall gravely ill. Just as they were about to push me in, an icy voice suddenly rang out from behind. "Stop!" Everyone startled and turned around, only to see the crown prince, who had appeared out of nowhere. He was still in his court robes, his face expressionless, but his eyes were sharp as knives, making people shiver without cause. Consort Zhang's face turned ashen. She hastily bowed. "This concubine greets your highness." The crown prince didn't even glance at her, his eyes merely sweeping over my disheveled appearance before stopping on the opened pastry box. He walked over, picked up the nibbled cake, and calmly bit into it. Only then did he turn to consort Zhang, a faint, unreadable smile playing on his lips. "This cake was imperfect from the oven. This prince happened to break off a piece to taste earlier." "What? Does consort Zhang see a problem with that?" Consort Zhang's face was as white as paper. She stammered, No, your highness. This concubine was confused and did not know." The crown prince threw the remaining piece of cake to the ground, his voice still gentle, but each word struck like a hammer blow. "Confused? This prince thinks you are not only confused but also incredibly brazen, daring to falsely accuse someone from Chenkian Palace. Do you take this prince for dead?" His words were in my defense, yet the thoughts I heard in his head chilled me to the bone. A foolish pawn manipulated by others. Prince Yang truly can't sit still. Using a woman to probe my reaction, truly a low move. This little mouse is really troublesome. She's caused trouble in just a few days, but to dare touch my things without permission, truly deserving of death. I was stunned. It turned out this was not a simple act of jealousy. Consort Zhang was merely a pawn, and the one pulling her strings was Prince Yang. The crown prince casually gave his order. Consort Zhang's conduct is reckless and lacks the demeanor of a mistress. She is confined to her palace for 3 months and must transcribe Lessons for Women 100 times. The others who colluded in this wrongdoing shall each receive 50 strokes and be expelled from the Eastern Palace. The matrons and palace maids were so terrified they prostrated themselves, begging for mercy, but the guards immediately dragged them away. Consort Zhang, her face drained of all color, tremblingly offered thanks and was escorted back to her palace. Only he and I remained in the deserted garden. He walked over, looking down at me, still sitting on the ground. He extended a hand. "Are you not getting up? How long do you intend to sit here?" I looked up at his slender, clean hand. I hesitated for a moment, then placed my hand in his. The warmth from his palm reached me, but it couldn't dispel the cold in my heart. He pulled me to my feet, then took out a handkerchief and wiped the dirt from my cheek. His actions were gentle, yet his thoughts were anything but. Crying again, so weak. But these tear-filled eyes look somewhat pitiful. "It seems I must keep her closer. Otherwise, this pawn might be ruined by others before I can even use her." I flinched, quickly stepping back, escaping his touch. "This servant thanks your highness for saving her life." He looked at me, his eyes deep and unfathomable. He said nothing, only turned and walked away. "Follow me back." I silently followed him, neither too far nor too close. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting flickering light and shadow on his straight back. I suddenly realized a terrifying truth. I was not just his prey. I had become the target of all his adversaries, and the most dangerous place turned out to be the safest. Only when I was by this demon's side could I hear the conspiracies surrounding me. This ability was no longer a curse tormenting me. It had become my only weapon for survival in this terrifying, gilded cage. After the incident at the Lotus Pond, my life temporarily returned to peace. No one dared to openly provoke me anymore. The Crown Prince also no longer summoned me to serve for trivial reasons. He seemed busier with political schemes and struggles. And I, the little pawn, was temporarily set aside on the chessboard. I was glad for it, yet a vague sense of unease lingered in my heart. Prince Yang's silence and the Crown Prince's calm felt like the flat surface of the sea before a storm. And the storm arrived on a late autumn night during a hunting banquet at the Imperial Garden. It was a grand banquet, attended by the Emperor, various princes, and of course, Prince Yang. I was merely a low-ranking palace maid, not qualified to attend, but the Crown Prince had specifically ordered me to accompany him to serve tea and pour wine. I knew this was another act, so I could only bow my head and obey. The atmosphere of the banquet outwardly seemed joyful, with music and praises echoing everywhere, but I sensed an underlying tension. I stood in a corner, trying to make myself invisible, quietly observing. I saw Prince Yang raise his cup to the Crown Prince several times, his face overly enthusiastic. The Crown Prince didn't refuse, calmly draining his cup. Everything seemed perfectly normal. But when the Crown Prince drank the third cup of wine, poured by Prince Yang himself, despite his outward calm, a cold, sharp thought suddenly echoed in my mind. This poison is slow-acting. It won't kill immediately but will weaken the body and disrupt inner energy. That old fox truly couldn't wait any longer. My heart felt squeezed by an invisible hand. Poison. He had been poisoned. I looked up at him in horror, only to see his complexion still rosy, nothing out of the ordinary. Without this ability, perhaps no one would have noticed. Immediately after, a guard rushed over, whispering something in his ear. The Crown Prince's expression subtly shifted. He stood up, cupped his hands, and addressed the Emperor. "Father Emperor, your son has an urgent military matter to attend to. I beg leave to withdraw." The Emperor nodded in agreement. The Crown Prince turned to leave, his steps still steady, but I heard his thoughts growing heavier. Must leave here immediately. Before the medicine takes full effect, I must return to the Eastern Palace. Cannot let anyone see my weakness. He swept past me, his cold eyes giving a signal. I understood, quickly bowed, and silently followed his retinue. Leaving the Imperial Garden, he didn't take his sedan chair but walked towards a secluded small path. After a short distance, he suddenly stumbled, having to lean on a nearby tree. His breathing became rapid. "Your Highness." Eunuch Li, his close attendant, cried out in alarm. "Everyone withdraw?" His voice was hoarse, filled with suppressed pain. "Lin An-Ran, you stay." Everyone was startled, but no one dared disobey, so they retreated to a distance, leaving only him and me under the dim moonlight. "Come here," he commanded. I trembled as I stepped forward. Under the moonlight, I could see his face had paled, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was enduring terrible pain. He suddenly reached out and pulled me fiercely. I lost my balance and fell into his arms. He leaned his entire weight on me, his hot breath fanning my neck. "Help! Help me to Jinxin Pavilion." Jinxin Pavilion was a small, secluded building in the palace, a place he often went to read alone. I had to use almost all my strength to help him walk. His body was burning hot, but the thoughts in his head were a chaotic mix of ice and fire. So hot. Damn it, that old man's poison is truly vicious. Her scent is so pleasant, it makes me feel a little clearer. Once we were inside Jinxin Pavilion, he closed the door tightly, then released me, stumbling to the bed and collapsing. He tore off his outer robe, revealing his firm chest rising and falling violently, his skin abnormally flushed. "Water," he rasped. I quickly poured a cup of cooled tea and tremblingly offered it to his lips. He drank it all in one gulp, then suddenly gripped my wrist tightly, his eyes, usually clear and cold, now bloodshot and feral, staring intensely at me. "Your Highness," I began. He said nothing, but in my mind a furious storm raged, no longer the calculated, hidden thoughts of before, only raw instinct and primal lust ignited by the poison. Unbearably hot. It feels like 1,000 ants are gnawing at my bones. She's here, so close. Her skin must be so cool, touching her would probably be a relief. I truly want to tear her clothes, pin her beneath me, want to hear her cries and pleas. Those raw, terrifying thoughts horrified me to the core. I tried to pull my hand back, but his strength was astonishing. He yanked hard and I lost my balance, falling onto him. "Ah!" I lay face down on his scorching chest. Our breaths mingled. He flipped me over, pinning me beneath him, his hands gripping my shoulders. Your Highness, come to your senses?" I cried out in fear, trying to push him away, but it was useless. He buried his face in the hollow of my neck, taking a deep breath. His burning breath caressed my skin, making me shiver. This scent is so sweet, like an opiate, soothing the pain in my body but awakening another, even more intense craving. Those lips look so soft. He slowly lifted his head, his bloodshot eyes fixed on my lips. His rationality seemed to have been swallowed by darkness. He leaned closer and closer. I desperately squeezed my eyes shut. Just as I thought I was about to be violated, I suddenly remembered a medical text I had once read. There was a type of poison called heart-devouring powder, whose symptoms were exactly like his now. This poison would stimulate a person's inner demons and desires, causing them to lose their reason. The only cure was to use cold water to lower the body temperature and simultaneously keep the mind pure. In that moment of crisis, I don't know where I found the courage, but I suddenly screamed loudly into his ear, "Crown Prince Yuan, your nation and ancestral altars are not yet secure. Do you want to destroy everything for a moment of lust? Prince Yang is out there, waiting for you to fall." His body stiffened. The two words, Prince Yang, seemed like a potent antidote, pulling back the last shred of his reason. The frenzy in his eyes slowly subsided, replaced by a struggling agony. He let out a low growl, like a wounded beast, then rolled off me, curling up at the edge of the bed, clutching his head with both hands. Pain? Too much pain. She's right, I cannot lose to that old man, but my body won't obey. I want her, I still want her so much. I quickly stood up, adjusting my disheveled robes. Seeing his agonizing state, the fear in my heart gradually subsided, replaced by a complex, indescribable emotion. I ran out to the courtyard, scooped a basin of cold water from the large jar, then returned, using a cloth soaked in water to wipe his forehead and body. Each time the cold cloth touched his skin, he would shiver, but his groans of pain seemed to lessen. I repeated this action for an unknown duration. That night, I was not a lowly palace maid, and he was not the lofty crown prince. I was simply one person trying to save another from the abyss. Finally, as dawn approached, the fever in his body gradually receded. He fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. I sat utterly spent on the floor, soaked in sweat, looking at his sleeping face, devoid of its usual cold calculation, only revealing fatigue and a touch of vulnerability. My heart suddenly softened. It turned out this demon also had moments when he didn't wear his strong facade, and tonight I had seen his truest and also his weakest self. Dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight piercing through the window, illuminating the crown prince's sleeping face. I must have drifted off at some point, curled up exhausted at the edge of the bed. When he stirred awake, his slight movement roused me. I startled awake, meeting his deep, dark pupils. The madness of last night had vanished, replaced by his inherent cold, profound demeanor, yet something was different. In his gaze, there was no longer malicious teasing, but a complex scrutiny. "Water," he said, his voice still hoarse. I quickly rose, but having sat for too long, my legs were numb and I almost collapsed. He instinctively reached out, but then paused midway. I quickly steadied myself against the bed and poured him a cup of warm tea. He drank it all, then silently watched me. His gaze made my heart pound with alarm. I could only bow my head. "She saved me last night." His thoughts echoed, terrifyingly calm. "She yelled my name, mentioned Prince Yang." How did she know that would grab my attention the most? And that poison, heart-devouring powder. How could a lowly palace maid know about such a lost, ancient poison? The questions in his head pricked my heart like needles. I realized with dread that in my panic last night, I had revealed too many vulnerabilities. "Thank you for last night," he suddenly spoke. This is my duty as a servant," I stammered in reply. He subtly curled his lip, but it wasn't a smile. "Duty. Is it your duty to know my given name, to know the antidote, and to know my greatest weakness?" I bit my lip hard, not daring to say another word. From that day on, my life changed once again. He no longer teased me with perverse thoughts. He treated me very well, bestowed upon me many valuable items, and told outsiders that I had rendered meritorious service in saving his life. But only I knew it was a gilded cage. He was observing me, testing me. A tense psychological game had begun. One afternoon, as I was serving in the study, he suddenly frowned and rubbed his temple, feeling a slight headache. If only I had a cup of honey chrysanthemum tea, how wonderful that would be. I stood motionless, fiercely conflicted within. Should I pretend not to know, or should I comply with his wishes? If I did as he wished, wouldn't that only make him more suspicious? In the end, I decided to remain silent. But a moment later, Eunuch Li entered, carrying a steaming cup. "Your Highness, please enjoy this honey chrysanthemum tea to soothe yourself." The Crown Prince glanced at the tea, then at me, his eyes unfathomably deep. A coincidence? Such coincidences grew more frequent by the day. He would think of a certain book, and I would coincidentally arrange it on the top shelf. He would think of wanting a particular pastry, and I would coincidentally instruct the kitchen to make it. I knew I was falling into his trap, but I couldn't control myself. The fear of his suspicion, coupled with a complex emotion born from that night, made me unconsciously want to please him, to help him solve small problems. I deceived myself, thinking it was just a servant's concern for her master. The climax came one rainy afternoon when Prince Yang suddenly paid a visit, bringing with him several key officials. They were discussing matters in the main hall, while I stood waiting outside. Through the crack in the door, I saw their faces were extremely tense. The Crown Prince maintained a calm expression, but in his mind, a storm raged. That old man is playing tricks again. He's pressing me to make a decision about flood relief in the south. If I agree to release funds from the treasury, he'll accuse me of embezzling public funds. If I refuse, he'll spread rumors that I'm heartless, indifferent to the people. He's blocked all routes, preventing memorials from the south from reaching Father Emperor. Now only the commentary on the southern rivers, which records the local terrain, can expose his conspiracy. But where did I hide that book? Ah, yes, the third shelf from the top on the western bookshelf, behind the strategies for pacifying Wu. My heart pounded. This was an opportunity, but also a fatal trap. Prince Yang and his group were pressing harder and harder. I couldn't delay any longer. Using the excuse of fetching tea, I rushed into the study. My heart pounded wildly. I ran to the western bookshelf, finding the third shelf. Just as his thoughts indicated, the strategies for pacifying Wu was there. I tremblingly reached behind it, and sure enough, I touched another book. It was it. I hugged the book and rushed back to the main hall. I dared not hand it directly to the Crown Prince, but subtly placed it on a small table closest to where he was sitting. The Crown Prince was debating with Prince Yang, and his gaze accidentally swept over the small table. When he saw the commentary on the southern rivers, his entire body stiffened for a second. A terrifying silence enveloped the room. He slowly turned his head to look at me, his eyes no longer merely scrutinizing, but chilling to the bone, as if he had seen through the deepest secrets of my soul. This chess game had reached checkmate, and the atmosphere in Chenkian Palace became suffocatingly terrifying. From the day my panic led me to retrieve the exact military text hidden in the Crown Prince's most secret spot, according to his thoughts, he stopped speaking a single word to me. He also stopped using perverse thoughts to tease me. He was simply silent. But that silence was 1,000 times more terrifying than any threat. He sat on his dragon chair, attending to official duties, while I stood serving in a corner of the hall. Even though he didn't look at me, I felt an invisible gaze, sharp as a dagger, piercing every inch of my skin. The heavy pressure made it almost impossible to breathe. He was waiting for me to reveal myself. This psychological torture lasted for 3 days. On the third night, he suddenly ordered everyone to withdraw, leaving only me in the vast study. The hall doors slammed shut, the sound echoing like death knocking. In the quiet space, only the crackling of candles could be heard, and my heart pounded erratically. "Come here and grind the ink." His calm voice broke the deathly silence. I trembled as I approached the writing desk, bowed my head, and began the familiar motions. I tried to focus on the ink stick in my hand, telling myself not to think, not to hear anything. He rose from his seat and slowly walked behind me. I could feel his breath on my nape, the familiar scent of sandalwood enveloping me like a net. "Your posture is incorrect," he said, then reached out. One of his hands rested on my waist, gently adjusting. "Your back must be straight." My entire body stiffened. The warmth from his palm permeated my thin robe like an electric current running down my spine. His other hand enveloped my hand, which held the ink stick. The pressure must be even, neither too fast nor too slow. His large hand completely swallowed mine. He held my hand, slowly moving the ink stick. His actions were perfectly proper, exactly like a strict teacher instructing a student. But in my head, a frantic tsunami raged. This waist is indeed as soft as I imagined. If I squeezed a little harder, would it break? The skin beneath this robe is probably even warmer and smoother than the finest silk. I am holding her hand, but why in my mind do I see these fingers clutching the bedsheets? Clang. The ink stick slipped from my hand, falling onto the inkstone and shattering into many pieces. "This servant deserves to die, this servant deserves to die," I cried, collapsing to the floor, my forehead pressed tightly against the cold tiles, my entire body trembling uncontrollably. He wasn't angry, he merely let out a soft chuckle, his voice carrying an unfathomable meaning. "Stand up." "I dare not," I said. "Stand up." I had no other choice but to shakily rise. He stepped in front of me, the distance between us very close. He leaned down, looking directly into my frightened eyes. His expression remained cold, but in his mind, a detailed, naked drama unfolded. These tear-filled eyes looked so pitiful. If I were to lean down and kiss them, would her tears taste salty? These trembling lips, if I were to gently bite them, would she cry out? I truly want to know how captivating she would look under candlelight if I stripped away all these cumbersome clothes. My face flushed, burning hot as if on fire. I unconsciously took a step back, but my back hit the hard edge of the table. "Why is your face so red?" He reached out, his cold fingers lightly brushing my cheek. "Are you afraid of me?" I dared not answer, only shook my head frantically. "Then why are you run?" His fingers slid down, stopping on my trembling lips, lightly tracing them. "What are you thinking?" "An-Ran," he called my name, each word clear and slow. And then he delivered the final blow. "Don't you know, I want to kiss you so badly. I want to taste if these lips are as sweet as I've always imagined. I will pry open your teeth, entangle your tongue, swallow every one of your moans. If you truly hear these words and you don't want that to happen." He paused for a moment, his eyes becoming dangerously deep. "Then push me away yourself." It was a perfect trap, a command that existed only in thought. He slowly lowered his head, his handsome face magnified before my eyes. I could clearly see my own panicked reflection in his dark pupils. His breath was already on my lips. I could feel the impending invasion. In that moment, my rationality completely collapsed and the instinct for survival surged stronger than everything else. I couldn't think anymore. I just put both hands on his chest and pushed with all my might. "Don't!" A desperate cry escaped my throat, but he wasn't pushed away at all. On the contrary, he seized my wrists, pulling me into his embrace. I fell against his firm chest. I looked up and met a smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had finally caught his prey. A satisfied, wicked, and utterly possessive smile. He didn't need me to confess. My actions had said it all. In my head, his voice echoed, this time no longer a thought but a declaration. "I've caught you, little mouse who can read my thoughts." Then, before I could react, he lowered his head and kissed my lips. It was not a gentle kiss. It carried punishment, dominance, and an undeniable possessiveness. He gently bit my lower lip as if in retaliation for my resistance, then invaded, stirring up my world. My mind went blank, all thoughts vanished, leaving only the intense, suffocating sensation his kiss brought. When he finally released my swollen lips, I could only weakly lean against his chest, gasping for breath. He held me tightly, his chin resting on the crown of my head, his voice whispering in my ear, both gentle and cruel. "From now on, you don't need to hide anymore," he chuckled softly, "because every single thought in my head is for you, and you, from body to soul, can only belong to me alone." After that night, everything changed completely. I was no longer the little palace maid who had to live in fear, but had become the crown prince's greatest secret. He no longer hid his thoughts. Instead, he transformed it into a unique, shared intimacy between us. My life was now a strange experience. During the day, before all the civil and military officials, he was a majestic and righteous ruler, discussing matters of state. But in my head, a completely different voice spoke. "That old minister of personnel really talks too much. Later, I must punish her by making her copy these tedious words 100 times. No, better yet, make her grind ink for an hour. I'll stand behind her, supervising and conveniently check if her waist has got any thinner today." I stood serving by his side, hearing those words, my ears burning hot, able only to bow my head very low to hide my flushed face. This change made me both embarrassed and feel an unnameable sweetness. He no longer used those thoughts to intimidate me, but turned them into a kind of shared pleasure, an invisible bond belonging only to us two. I was no longer a passive listener, but had become the only person in this world who could step into his true inner world. And this ability finally became my sharpest weapon in the life-or-death game against Prince Yang. On the emperor's birthday, the entire imperial palace was adorned with lanterns and flowers. At the state banquet, when emissaries and officials were all present, Prince Yang finally made his move. His plan was flawless. He would accuse the crown prince of colluding with foreign nations, plotting rebellion, and simultaneously have soldiers he had prearranged in the capital rush in to catch him red-handed. I stood behind the crown prince, my heart pounding like a drum. Outwardly, he calmly raised his cup, but in his mind, a detailed counterplan was laid out. An-Ran later, when that Jin envoy stands up, you must accidentally spill the wine pitcher on Commander Yuan, who is seated on the left. Remember, it must be the strongest wine. I subtly nodded, unnoticed by anyone. Just as he predicted, the Jin envoy stood up and began reading a forged secret letter. At the same moment, I walked over carrying a pitcher of wine, my foot tripped on the edge of the carpet, and the entire pitcher splashed directly onto Commander Yuan. "Ah!" he cried out in surprise. The strong smell of wine spread, drawing everyone's attention. The envoy's play was perfectly interrupted. Well done. His thoughts carried a hint of a smile. That Commander Yuan is Prince Yang's man. He intended to seize the opportunity amidst the chaos to pull out his token to command the Imperial Guards. Now he reeking of wine, anything he does will be suspicious. Next, Prince Yang feigned anger, demanding a search of Chenqian Palace for evidence. "Don't worry," he thought to me, "go close to Eunuch Lei and whisper 2 words to him, Treasury of Texts Pavilion. Everything is already prepared there." I obeyed. While Prince Yang's men futilely ransacked Chenqian Palace, the Crown Prince's guards returned from the Treasury of Texts Pavilion with a large chest of letters. Inside were all the correspondences between Prince Yang and the Jin nation, evidence proving that the true plotter of rebellion was he. Prince Yang's face turned ashen. He could not have imagined that every one of his moves seemed to have been within the Crown Prince's grasp. He lost utterly, without understanding why. That night, after all the turmoil had passed, the Crown Prince returned to his study. He said nothing, only pulled me into his lap, holding me tight. "You've worked hard today," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. I shook my head, leaning into his warm embrace. "This is what I should do." He chuckled softly, a smile no longer bearing wickedness, only gentleness and appreciation. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. "Without you, tonight I might have lost. You are not my pawn, you are my trump card, the blessing bestowed upon me by heaven." Hearing these words, my nose stung with tears. All the fear, all the grievances I had endured for so long seemed to melt away. Do you know? His thoughts continued, this time returning to their familiar perverse nature. "To reward you, tonight I will not let you sleep. I will kiss every inch of your skin, from your eyelids, the tip of your nose, to even your toes. I want to hear you call my name, from sobbing pleas until your voice is hoarse." I blushed, buried my head in his chest, and lightly hit him. He laughed heartily, his refreshing laughter echoing throughout the study. 1 year later, the emperor abdicated, and Crown Prince Yuan ascended the throne, becoming a wise, decisive, and handsome ruler. And I, Lin An-Ran, from a 5th-rank palace maid, became his empress, the mother of the realm. I no longer had to feign foolishness, nor did I have to fear anyone. I stood by his side, sharing the burden of the nation with him. My ability became the strongest bridge, helping me to understand every thought and burden of a monarch. One afternoon, we walked together in the imperial garden. He held my hand, our fingers intertwined. The gentle sunset light fell upon him, making his imperial robes even more radiant. He looked at me, his eyes full of amusement and deep love. I didn't need to ask, for I had heard everything he wanted to say. People say that I have gained the whole world, but they don't know that this whole world, plus me, from my thoughts to every breath, belongs to you alone.